Alex Hayne won, I believe Jesse Hampton had over a 10-point lead going into the last Pro Tour.
Oh, so another thief.
Well, yeah, then Hayne had to do something like win the Pro Tour.
Oh, well, that's no problem.
Yeah, that's 30 points.
Yeah, that's
Bam,
really easy
right there.
I don't see the problem here. We'll take a look at this game state. You see Davis, he's got 6 lands in play, 2 Mutavaults, looks like actually 3 Mutavaults among them, and only 1 blue source of mana, so 2 white lands over there. Boettcher, you can see his lands that are in play. He's on a different take. He's black, red devotion. That's why you're going to see the Temple of Epiphany in play, a card that we don't see a lot in Standard. Also a mana influence as well. Davis did win game number 1, but if you're wondering what the red splash is here for Boettcher, he's got Rakdos' Returns in his main deck, 2 of those, 2 copies of Dreadbore, 2 copies of Mizzium Mortars, and a Challenger Pyromaster. We'll get to the sideboarded red cards in a moment. We'll turn our attention to this game. Davis's hand a little bit slow here as he plays an Azorius Guildgate.
And that Temple of Epiphany and Mana Confluence are some cheeky dual lands there. Opting instead of going for the blue-black duel, he went for the blue-red duel. He's slowly getting extra value off his Night Veil Specters. He doesn't actually play blue cards.
Yep. And we have seen that before in versions of this deck. You can see Jim's hand right now. He has a Jace Architect of Thought. Also has a copy of Deicide as well. And it looks like he's going reaching, maybe looking to fire up a Mutavault or 2. We'll see. As Boettcher patiently waits. Number 28 on our leaderboard. He had a bye coming in this tournament. Jim Davis, number 5. He got catapulted that high due to his performance last weekend in Providence. He had 2 buys. As Boettcher, looking at his hand, there's a Rakdos' Return hanging out over there.
Yeah, so the red, that sure will give him extra value here. Jim's Blue White Control, this is the same one he made top 4 with last weekend.
That's right.
It's interesting. It's the first, I'd say, Blue White Controlist I've seen to start shaving on Jaces.
Yeah, he only has 2. We only had 2 last week. He only has 2 this weekend. And he said he was really happy with that number as Boettcher is tapping 6 mana here. This is a Rakdos' Return. It's going to be for 4. Davis's hand right now, a Jace, a Guildgate, and a Deicide. To the bin those go. And Davis will take 4 as well. But the Grey Merchant cannot attack in the face of all those Mutavaults. So Davis will simply draw his card and pass the turn back over to Boettcher, who will untap those 6 lands, draws a Swamp for the turn, has another copy of Rakdos' Return over there.
All right, so yeah, Davis out of cards here, but he doesn't have any pressure yet. So now it's a race if Jared can find one of his pressure cards before Davis basically top decks a Revelation.
Boettcher draws a copy of Erebos, God of the Dead. So a card drawing engine that he can cast. Pretty close to the devotion on that with Grey Merchant in play. It'll be at 3, only 2 away from being able to attack. And I actually think in this situation, more importantly, can't gain any life if you're Davis.
Yeah, so Erebos is unique in that I think it's one of the few cards in the format that actually can go late with Revelation. Normally Revelation kind of has this title that, you know, once we get to turn 11, like the Revelation decks beat everything. If you have a resolved Erebos in play, sometimes the blue-white player can rev for 7 and still lose. And it's one of the only cards that makes that possible.
So Erebos is placed in the stack. You see Davis going to look at his hand. He's going to go with the Syncopate. Now, Davis's draws for the last 2 turns were Syncopate and Dissolve.
Huge.
Yeah, those are really, really big draws in a situation like this. So Erebos is going to get Syncopated. That's going to bite the dust. And now what we do get to see here most likely is Grey Merchant get to attack, but actually it's going to hang back on defense. A little surprised by that.
Well, if Jared swings for 2, Davis counter swings for 6.
Okay, that's
the
fair.
life totals actually are in Davis's favor if we start racing.
Well, Boettcher decides, I don't have any interest in racing. I'm going to hang back on D, not going to take a chip shot at you. Davis's draw for the turn was a Planner Cleansing, not what we're really looking for. If you're Jim, you have to imagine he's just going to keep that Dissolve up. But I do like the fact that he is, you know, kind of tanking here a little bit.
So here's the worry. So say he swings for 2. Jim Davis counter swings for 6. And then the next turn, Davis can suicide a Mutavault into the Grey Merchant to kill him.
Yeah.
He actually would win on 2 attacks, which is a really strange spot to be in from the black-red side. You know, to be kind of like facing this near-lethal Mutavault army.
See what we have here. It looks like Boettcher may have picked up another copy of Grey Merchant. I think he's trying to figure out, all right, do I want to lead with that or do I want to lead with this? A Rakdos' Return will get dissolved, however.
Yeah, Rakdos' Return is a magnet for counter spells because the card will be discarded anyway. So, you know, it's kind of how, you know, both Thoughtseize and Rakdos' Return do that. If they have a negate, they pretty much are forced to play it on the card.
Top card goes to the bottom there for Jim. It was a Hallowed Fountain. Boettcher, I think, deciding if he wants to attack, but he's going to stay steady.
It was closer there. I think if Davis only had 1 Mutavault in play, Boettcher would have done it.
Well, that's a good draw.
Well,
Elspeth, Sun's champion in the house.
It's only a matter of time till blue-white gets to top deck a Revelation or a Planeswalker. And Jim Davis has done just that. He found Elspeth. Jared's not out of it yet. He gets to take this opportunity to Gray Merchant once. That's going to be half of Jim's life total. He's going to have to find a way to do the other half, though.
It's a top-decking war. And Davis looks like he might be getting the better end of it right now, but this Gray Merchant is still pretty good. It's going to gain Boettcher 4 life, put him up to 13, but more importantly, it's going to put Davis down to 4. So Davis is going to untap all those lands. Don't forget, 3 Mutavaults out there for Jim. So he is going to try to close this game out very quickly. As a Hallowed Fountain comes rolling off the top of his deck, we see the Planar Cleansing, but Cleansing has no effect on this board.
Yeah, Cleansing not exactly what he wants. Because both the Rakdos' returns are in the yard, Jared's really, I believe, just on one of his remaining 2 Gray Merchants.
We're going to take a look at the sideboard here for Boettcher while Davis does ponder his turn. 3 Duress, 3 Lifebane Zombie, an Erebos God of the Dead, an Ultimate Price of Dreadbore, a Sire of Insanity, an additional Rakdos' return, so you have to imagine he has 3 after sideboard, a Hammer of Perforos, a Magma Spray, a Whip of Erebos, and a Devour Flesh. So he definitely has some big draws here. That 3rd Rakdos' return. Sire of Insanity, oddly enough, just only okay. In this board position.
Elspeth has already resolved, which makes a lot of these things, Hammer of Perforos, Sire of Insanity, normally these would be great top decks, but Jared really just needing that direct damage, which Rakdos' return and Gray Merchant give.
Boettcher just going to play a swamp and has to pass the turn back over to Davis, who will untap that Hallowed Fountain. 6 soldiers in play from Elspeth, Sun's champion. He will take a draw. I think Jim's best draw in this situation is just a counterspell. I think Dissolve is probably the best draw in this situation. Lock out the next top deck from Boettcher, but that's not what he found. He found a copy of Temple of Enlightenment. You have to imagine he's going to play it, and he does. So he's going to take a look at the top card. It's a Divination. That one's not so bad.
No, it has a good chance of being a Dissolve. The only card that's better that's on par with Dissolve, well, Sphinx's Revelation is always pretty good.
Of course.
When you have, what is it? 9 lands in play, turn 12, Revelation, usually a good card.
Davis surveying the position. Again, those 3 Mutavaults among those lands. Only a couple of sources of blue mana out there in Guild Gates and Temples. Looks like you have to imagine an Elspeth activation here may happen. But I think what Jim's trying to figure out is, what's it going to take for me to get this game over with? Is there any way I can do it faster than next turn? And I do not believe that is the case. So he's going to go reaching for soldier tokens. It's time for 3 more of them. Elspeth is going to take up to 7. And now the ultimate is being threatened. So for Boettcher, he needs a good draw, and he needs it like right now.
Yeah. He can fortunately play around Bioblight as well.
This is interesting. We're getting very aggressive here. 2 blocks in the Mutavaults. Jim is going to attack for a bunch of damage. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Boettcher's going to go down to 5. Are you a little surprised by that attack?
Well, he's got him dead next turn either way. I think what that does is, in the situation that Boettcher were to, say, draw Underworld Connections and then Connections into an answer, he has fewer life points to work with. Okay. It's a pretty corner situation, but I think the correct play on Jim Davis's side.
Well, I think, my friends, looks like we might be heading to a 3rd game here. You may have the totals wrong, but we will make sure to see exactly what did happen here. It looks like maybe Boettcher did win game number 1, so looks like we're heading to a 3rd game between these 2 players. So the action doesn't stop just yet.
All right, and we did see there, interestingly enough, normally blue-white is the favorite in game 1, and it's games 2 and 3 where the black deck gets stronger. We've seen both players kind of take the game that they weren't favored to take.
Now, we're going to look at the sideboard yet again. I know we quickly went over Boettcher's, but again, for those of you guys who are just joining us, 3 Duress, 3 Lifebane Zombie, Erebos God of the Dead, an Ultimate Price, a Dreadbore, a Sire of Insanity, a Rakdos' return to go along with his 2 in the main deck, a Hammer of Perforos, a Magma Spray, a Whip of Erebos, and a Devour Flesh. So you have to imagine 3 Duress and Erebos, that's 4. Dreadbore could potentially be 5. Sire of Insanity, Rakdos' return, Hammer of Perforos, that's 6, 7, and 8. You throw in maybe a Whip of Erebos, maybe a Devour Flesh, 8 and 9. A lot of good options here for Jared.
Jared's main deck's pretty good against control, and his sideboard is only better. This is one of the more hateful builds for blue-white to deal with. He hasn't gone as far to start casting cards like Slaughter Games, but he's basically gone up to that point. This is, I would say, certainly a blacklist that I wouldn't want to see as a control deck.
What are you looking at for Jim?
Well, Jim is not on the creature pool land on the board. He does have 3 Archangel of Thunes, but I just don't think they're that good for this matchup. He's probably still trying to be the control deck. That becomes a lot harder. He does have negates, which I have to assume he's boarded in. Other than that, he has a Deicide, which is great. It hits Underworld Connections and the Erebos. And we may see him switch up some of his removal, but those are mainly the cards that he's playing. If he knows Jared has a Sire of Insanity, then he has to renounce the guilds in the sideboard as a way to deal with it. He also has a reprisal. So those are all things he could have for Sire, but then again, he'd have to have the read that Jared plays Sire.
I suppose that's true. And these players are from relatively the same area. Boettcher from the Albany area, Davis more of a New York, New Jersey guy. So, you know, I imagine they're familiar with each other due to PTQs and things of that nature, but do they know what each other is playing? We'll find out as we do watch the events unfold here in the third and final game. You see Davis is doing some heavy sideboarding, it looks like. Make sure he's happy with his configuration. Again, Jim putting this deck on the map last weekend in Providence with a semifinal appearance before being dispatched by Ross Merriam, the Standard Open champion from Providence. Boettcher has made a real name for himself in both Grand Prix, Pro Tours, and on the Open Series. Sitting at 7-2 here, he top 8 at the last Invitational we did, Season 1 in Charlotte, playing Red-White Painter in Legacy and Black-White Devotion, the same deck that he was able to top 8 Grand Prix Cincinnati with. He did that again at our Invitational in Charlotte earlier this year. So both these players having a lot of success here in 2014, but only one of them can win this match, and whoever does move on to 8-2.
Yeah, so Jim Davis with his board plan here, it looks like he's keeping in Azorius Charms. That's always something which is you can go back and forth on with mono black in the matchup. They usually are just card draw spells. He's cut a couple dissolves. It looks like he's trying to keep his curve a little bit lower.
It feels like to me he's cutting those counter spells when he is on the draw simply because he needs more high impact cards. He's going to be playing against a lot of discard now. Right. So chances are that, you know, he's not going to be able to do what he wants to do, which is just leave up a counter wall. And even if he does, Boettcher can just lead off with a duress to take the counter spell and then resolve the spell that he cares about. So I can understand boarding out the counter magic in this situation.
What Davis actually wants in his opening hand is lands. Maybe a Temple thrown in there and a Mutavault. You have to, there's 7 duress effects in Jared's deck. You have to assume that whatever great card you keep in your opener, it's going to get taken. So lands and card draw are a premium. And that does give Davis some game here, the fact that he's playing 4 Divination.
Well, just so that you guys do know at home, we do have a Standard Open that's taking place today. What we'll do, of course, today is that we will cover all of our rounds of our Invitational. We've got this round, then 2 more of Standard, then 4 of Legacy. We'll figure out who our top 8 players will be tomorrow. Take a little break, and then we'll come back and cover our Standard Open. And apparently it's going to be a nice one. 705 players have shown up.
Not the record, but not a shabby number.
Not at all. No, we only do have 10 rounds. I say only like it's not that many, but 705 players doing battle here at the Origins Game Fair for our first Open of Season 3. This is the one that kicks things off. So players are going to be able to really put their name up there as far as the Season 3 leaderboard is concerned. Maybe start carving out a path to the Players' Championship.
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting. Yeah, so they do start the standings anew for Season 3.
Yeah, the Invitational is the last tournament for each season. So this Invitational that we're watching right now, and this match between Boettcher and Davis, this is it for these guys for Season 2. But, of course, because of what happens with the points, every point is important over the course of the year. Davis has a real shot at an at-large bid, at the end of the year.
Yeah, sitting at number 5 seed, if the year were to end right now, Davis would get one of the invites to the Invitational. So he's on pace, off a string of pretty strong finishes in the last month.
And he's been doing a lot of his work in the IQ series, too. You know, he plays a lot of IQs in his area, and, you know, it's obviously paying off for him. Him, Gerard Fabiano as well, those guys have been grinding away at those IQs to try to qualify for the Players' Championship. Just right now, taking a look at the overall leaderboard, Davis sitting in 7th place for one of those at-large bids, and of course they are given out to the top 8 players, so he's barely clinging on to one right now, but assuming a good finish here and a lot of good finishes over the rest of the year, chances are we'll see him in Roanoke.
And Boettcher not out of the race. You see, he's 28th overall. He had 1 bye for the Invitational. He's currently on the outside of the at-large bids, but not by too much. If a string of good finishes, and he definitely would be in the mix.
And a player of his caliber, I wouldn't be surprised to see him there either. He keeps his opening 7. Davis is taking a look at his. There's a Temple Enlightenment and I believe another land. A couple of copies of Azorius Charm as well to cycle and generate a little bit of velocity. As Temple Enlightenment is where Boettcher's going to start. So both players are going to keep. And it's time to scry here for Jared.
Yeah, the advantage of what Azorius Charms do here is it virtually raises Jim's land count past 27 even. And lands are such a premium in this matchup. that I imagine he's happy to see those Azorius Charms.
Jim looks at an island. He's going to keep that on top. Boettcher's draw for the turn was an Underworld Connections. He's going to fire off a Pack Rat here. So put a little bit of pressure on Jim.
Yeah, Pack Rat's interesting. Usually it's not that strong in this matchup. If Jim leaves it there forever, Jared can put him in some awkward spots, but he can ignore the Pack Rat for a while.
Jim with just an island and passing the turn back. Likely see a cycle of an Azorius Charm here. It looks like Boettcher picked up another copy of Pack Rat for his draw step. We saw the Underworld Connections on the last turn, so we'll see how he wants to lead things out here. He's going to start by playing a Swamp.
Yeah, I imagine we'll see Lifebane Zombie so that he knows whether or not the way is clear for Underworld Connections. He doesn't have the 4th land to go Connections land on turn 4 yet, so he would have to... The risk of playing Lifebane Zombie is that you're 2 turns away from drawing extra cards, if indeed the coast is clear.
Looks like it's just going to be an attack here for 1, no activation.
Yeah.
And there is the Lifebane Zombie that you mentioned.
More interestingly, no Azorius Charm from Davis.
It feels like that Azorius Charm is reserved for cycling. Davis is going to show his hand. 2 copies of Azorius Charm, which we knew. A Revelation, a Jace, a Planar Cleansing, a Supreme Verdict, and a Plains. So Azorius Charm, we're hoping you find lands, I think.
Yeah, we want Azorius Charm to find lands. Supreme Verdict will probably be cast on turn 4. And really Cleansing was hoping to be cast on turn 6. Jared will want to cast Underworld Connections and score as many free cards off it as he can before that Cleansing hits.
Azorius Charm is going to cycle into Azorius Charm right now, just so that you do know.
Yeah, he is going to need that 4th land, though, next turn if he wants to start drawing cards right away.
So Boettcher recording this information. He's happy with what he sees. He will pass the turn back again. Jim cycling Azorius Charm into Azorius Charm. He'll take a draw. It's an Azorius Guildgate. You got to imagine that's the land he's playing this turn.
Yeah, he wants the Jace on turn 4. He has no 3-mana spells. Seems like a straightforward play here to play the Guildgate.
So Jim will be under the gun a little bit here. One thing about Boettcher is that he has not played a discard spell just yet. So again, 4 Thoughtseizes, 3 Duras Scepter sideboard, and then 3 copies of Rakdos' Return. Can't forget about Sire of Insanity as well, even though that's much longer down the road.
And that's dodging a bullet for Jim. From the control side, I do believe that the Thoughtseize and Duress are the best cards for Mono Black in this matchup.
Especially on the opening turns of the game.
Yeah, even though the cards that end up winning are cards like Erebos and Underworld Connections, the ability to selectively take their answers and then play cards to sculpt the rest of your plays around them, I just think can't be overstated.
Looks like Davis is considering casting a Azorius Charm to put a card back on top of the deck, and that's what he's going to do. So he's going to put Lifebane Zombie on top of the deck here. I thought we may see him cycle that one, but what he's also doing here is that Boettcher saw this Azorius Charm. He hasn't seen the 3rd one yet.
Yeah, he's slowing Boettcher down right now. He was okay taking a hit from Pack Rat because it was 1. 3 from Lifebane Zombie is a little harder to palate.
It looks like he wants to keep that life total pretty high. There's a chance that Boettcher does discard a card for Pack Rat. We'll see if that's what he wants to do. He doesn't look thrilled about this Azorius Charm and Lifebane Zombie, though, because you can see his hand. I don't know if there's a 4th land hiding out there or not. He may have drawn one, and he actually did. Okay, so that's not the end of the world. But I mean, Davis is only going to go down to 18.
Once he hit the 4th land, I can't see him making any play other than Connections tap.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
This is the prize in the matchup.
Especially when you know your opponent doesn't have Detention Sphere, even though Jim does have access to Deicide, as here's a Jace. He's going to take this down. So Jim wants his cards right now.
This is a great spot to -2 a Jace. A lot of times against Black Devotion, you just play a Jace and -2 it into a lethal board because you don't want it to get Hero's Downfall when you plus it. Jim gets to play a Jace -2 it, and it's not necessarily going to die next turn. Jared would have to discard a card to make that happen. A great sequence for Jim.
Jim's going to turn over a Dissolve, a Divination, and a land here with this Jace. And Boettcher has a real decision to make. Dissolve, you know, it's not the best card in this matchup, but it's actually kind of good given the situation that we're in. But now Davis, you know, does he have lands? Does he need lands? I think that's the split we may see. But however, Divination, you know, that does a pretty good job of finding you lands. So a tough split here, actually.
Yeah, if he gives the Dissolve is great, as you said, because what Jim can do is he can just sit back behind a Dissolve, and while Jared will get extra cards, they won't matter as much. Eventually, Jim will planar cleansing everything away and get to start again. I think it's an interesting split from Jared, and as we know, ends up being, I think, the right split.
Yeah, I think Jim actually just needs this land. But it looks like he's going to take the Divination and the Dissolve. He's going to take the 2 cards, maybe with the idea that, all right, Divination, I need you to hit me some lands.
And I agree with how Jim played this. Despite the fact that he needs a land, that is too much value to not take. The thing is, eventually he's going to hit 6 land just naturally. And the question will be, how much damage can Jared do before he hits 6 lands? Because Jim has all these cards, I think he feels he can mitigate that damage, and I'm inclined to agree.
Boettcher with an Underworld Connections activation picks up that copy of Lifebane Zombie. His draw for the turn was a Mutavault. So you mentioned how Boettcher's turn may have to simply be activate Pack Rat to kill Jace. Well, Mutavault makes that a lot easier on the mana.
Yeah, Mutavault lets him do that and not get 2 for 1 and then make another play. A really good draw.
The main phase activation of Connections draws Boettcher another copy of Connections. He's going to tap 3 mana right now. Going to deploy Lifebane Zombie. Actually going to discard it and take care of this. So he still does make that play.
And I'm interested in that he made that play because he knows that Jim has a Supreme Verdict.
Syncopate the draw here. Jim not able to find a land this turn. Looks like he may be forced to cast a Divination.
Yeah, this is a painful Divination to cast because he could be taking a lot of damage here.
Deicide and a land. It's a Hollow Fountain. Pretty big draw there.
Yeah, he can shock and take care of the Underworld Connections. I don't imagine we're going to see him do it. It just seems to me like he's building up toward a big planar cleansing. We may even see him shock and Azorius Charm just to try to find that land and set up for the planar cleansing next turn.
Davis looking at a whole lot of cards over there in his hand. As we are almost under 13 minutes in this round. TikTok does go the clock for these players. A real decision to be made here for Jim Davis. It's going to be a close game here. Both players with pretty strong hands. Davis looking for lands. He has put one on the bottom already with that Azorius Guildgate from the Jace, but 27 lands in his deck. You have to imagine some are going to come rolling off the top here.
Yeah, I mean, he's about 50% to draw land on any given draw here, especially because he's already had these redraws with Azorius Charms. It's all about him making it to this planar cleansing. We'll see. And I do think I like Jim's play. He's going to go ahead and shock here. But it's not for the Azorius Charm. He's going to go ahead and deicide the Underworld Connections. And that's a little bit of a hedge. He's saying if he doesn't hit the planar cleansing, then he doesn't want to get blown out by this Underworld Connections.
Yeah, Connections is scary. So that makes sense to me.
Okay, he's going to take some damage here. It's without an active Connections, it's going to be very difficult for Jared to amass enough resources just to deal with Jim's hand. Jim can probably wait for a while and even brick on that land and be fine.
So now it's on Boettcher. You see his board. A couple of swamps, a Temple of Epiphany to mitigate that red splash while being able to cast Nightveil Spectre, and a Mutavault, arguably the best land that's down there. Pack Rat in play. 2/2/2 rats with the ability to make more, as well as Mutavault allowing to pump them. Underworld Connections in the grip. You see a swamp there as well, Lifebane Zombie that we know about. So some really good cards here in Boettcher's hand. The big question is, how does he want to navigate things?
Well, Jim's got a good hand against Underworld Connections. This planar cleansing build in general is just good against Connections. I think what Jared could do, and what he may do, is play the Connections into it anyway, see whether or not, and he's going to hope to draw a Duress here. If Jared just gets his extra card, oh wow, and he's going to go ahead and just swing Mutavault before he draws his extra card.
So we're just moving in right now.
I was wondering, because if his extra card is a Duress, I imagine he would have fired it off and taken the planar cleansing.
Sure. Well, let's see if Davis can draw an untapped land here. Is that Azorius Guildgate?
That is a Guildgate. Oh, what an ugly land.
That's one of the worst feelings there is. Now, one thing we do know is that Jim does have Supreme Verdict, so he's okay.
Some people were saying, man, I can't wait till that Blue-White Temple's printed, then we can stop playing these Guild Gates. But the truth of the matter is, we are going to play the Guild Gates and the Temples.
You just get to play both. It's a luxury,
boy.
right?
Yeah, every time you draw a Guild Gate, oh, oh boy.
If that land would be coming to play untapped, or heck, if it was even a Hollow Fountain, I'm sure Jim would pay the 2 to cast the planar cleansing right now on this board, but he's not able, so he's got to figure out something else to do on this turn. You see his hand, he's got a lot of great cards there, but he needs to be able to convert those and cast them. He's going to play Supreme Verdict. There's your Guild Gate. He's at 8.
And this is what I liked about Jim's hand. Despite the fact that he's let an Underworld Connections happen for 3 turns in a row, he just had so much power in his hand that it's going to still be challenging for Jared to go through all those cards.
Boettcher with a Gray Merchant of Asphodel. He's going to play a Mana Confluence. He's going to cast this Gray Merchant. You can kind of see where this is going. This is going to be a drain for 4. It's going to put Davis down to 4. A Mutavault activation is going to put him down to 2. And I really like the way that Boettcher has balanced this game here. putting Jim in a rock and a hard place every single turn. It looked like he may have been getting a little over-aggressive with Pack Rat, but he understands that I got to get you dead. I don't want to play much longer. I can play longer, but the long game, of course, favors you. And for Jim, the tough thing here was if he was able to pass that Planner Cleansing on time, we're looking at a much different game.
Right. Jim's at 2. He's short on life right now. He can't afford to Cleansing because the Mutavault will kill him if he does. But it's unclear whether he has other plays that work well for him. He has to stop that Mutavault and the Gray Merchant next turn.
And this is part of the reason that we saw Jim cast Azorius Charm on Lifebane Zombie on turn 3, simply because, hey, I got to keep my life total high. They can do a lot of chip shots of me, and then Gray Merchant, Rakdos Return, and Mutavault's like, that can finish me off. And that's what's happening right now.
What Jim can do to stay alive, and this is an ugly line, is he can Revelation for 1 and Azorius Charm the Mutavault.
That's the definition of ugly.
It's not what you want to have happen.
Yeah,
he
right
could
about
rev
that.
for 2 and hope to hit a basic, and then play a land and Azorius Charm the Mutavault.
Well, he's just going to rev for 3 right now.
All right.
So hit 1, 2, and 3. Boettcher's going to show him a Gray Merchant. Says, I'm not slow rolling you, my friend. I've got the answer. Davis is going to look at his hand, and he'll extend it. Jared Boettcher is going to win this match over Jim Davis. 2 games to 1. Black-Red Devotion getting the job done over Blue-White Control, and for the Rookie of the Year frontrunner, on 8-2 here on our Season 2 Invitational.
Yeah, a good transition from Jared. Normally, when you have an uncontested connections, Black Devotion goes on this control plan where you just draw a bunch of Thought Seizes and Duresses and just grind down the blue-white player. You never let them resolve a Revelation of Value, get the game that way. Because of the hand that Jim Davis kept and that Jared saw off Lifebane Zombie, he transitioned in that spot to playing a beatdown game, which is another route that Black-Red Devotion can do. He had a couple Gray Merchants.